Let's speak to two people now about the situation in Gauteng and in eThekwini. Of course, Nelson Mandela Bay going the way of the ANC earlier today. Professor Sethulego Matebesi is an academic head of department, associate professor of sociology at the University of the Free State, a political analyst. Dr. Sebake is a political analyst and director for student governance and development at Nelson Mandela University. Gentlemen, good afternoon to you, and thank you very much indeed for your time. Professor Matebesi, let me start with you. I'm going to have to go through the numbers first because of the surprise in Ekurhuleni, where we see the DA's Raymond Dlamini elected as Speaker. He won, as I understand it, 116 votes. The ANC's candidate won 104. I do, I'm afraid, have to run through the numbers in the council for you. The ANC has 86 seats, the Democratic Alliance 65, the EFF 31, Action SA 15, the Freedom Front Plus 8, the Patriotic Alliance 4, the IFP 3. The reason I say this, Professor, is that if I scratch my head and get out my calculator, the only way that the DA could have won this election for the position of Speaker in Ekurhuleni is if either ANC people voted for the wrong person, which seems very unlikely to me, or if some EFF councillors, the majority of them, voted for the DA candidate.
Hi, good afternoon, Stephen, and good afternoon to my fellow panelists. Good afternoon, South Africans. We should understand we have moved into a fragile space. It is a space which perhaps we had a template after the 2016 elections. But remember, at the end of the day, whether the parties at national level will make decisions, it's still up to the individual councillors. And we have known, the EFF have made public pronouncement about their stance with the Democratic Alliance. And I will not be surprised that some EFF members have definitely voted for the candidature of the DA. And that will open up a completely different ball game altogether as to what is actually going on here. But as I've indicated, the rules of engagement in terms of politics at local government have changed. And let us not just hope. And I'm going to have to put a lot of emphasis on this because I know people who have the luxury and the wisdom to play with words often say, don't borrow sorrow from tomorrow. And let us just hope, and here I'm referring to the Democratic Alliance, with their attitude in terms of these coalition agreements, or discussions at least. Let us just hope they are not, borrowing sorrow from future elections.
Dr. Sebake, I'd like to pick up on that point that the rules, the ball game has changed. Do you agree with that? I mean, this is a very surprising result in Ekurhuleni.
Let me start by greeting you and the fellow panelists here and the people of South Africa generally. I must accept that indeed the ball game has changed because from that lens, we will agree that the coalition is a product of control by the national leadership of any political party, but it also has both local context and personal context. So as a result, the way these particular elections of speakers and mayors are happening today, it's as if the level of political conscience has dropped. Political parties at the national level, they are playing what you call balance of forces, but from the national context. So I think I'm not surprised that indeed it's a new dynamic altogether, but it shows that our politics are developing a new paradigm that we must be in position to really look at it from the lens as we move along.
Professor Matebesi, I mean, if it is the case that the EFF councillors, or many of them, voted in favour of the DA, I mean, why? The theory, I suppose, would go to have some kind of leverage, some kind of power over the DA, which the DA obviously won't want them to have.
Yeah, no, well, one should understand what is happening at all these, as Bernard have indicated, the local context plays a significant role. And remember, we are talking about individuals who have perhaps lived their entire life in those municipal areas. So they know the context, they know the circumstances. And at the end of the day, I strongly believe in the corridors and even during the campaigning, and this is what I observed during the elections, how some people will think that there's hatred between these political parties, but how they actually embrace one another. During heated debates and even afterwards shakes hands. And so they might have been outside of the, the discussions that happened at national level between the different parties. There might have been some discussions at local government, at local level, and I think strongly believe perhaps that have played a role, where an individual still believe, an ardent EFF member, and perhaps even an ANC member, an outlier, who still believe that, but here I am going to advance the needs of the residents, and I'm going to vote against my own party because the potential for being seen, to be, found that you have actually transgressed, it's quite slight, especially if it is a secret ballot, and that's why I strongly believe that perhaps some members of the African nation, of the EFF, voted for the Democratic Alliance because of the track record of the Democratic Alliance, let alone the ideological differences between the two parties.
Dr. Sebake, we need to talk about the city that you're from, Nelson Mandela Bay. Going to the ANC, I mean, the closest of close margins today, last-minute deal with a party that I think outside of the Eastern Cape, very few people will have heard of, the Northern Alliance. They've, in fact, become the speaker. But the ANC will be celebrating. I suppose the difficult question is this a coalition that will last 5 years?
You know, you've asked a very pertinent question that I've been asking myself all along, just after the results have been announced for both the speaker and the mayor. I think the point here is that the small political parties have started to play and define their role in the landscape of politics in our own country, and which is an interesting development at our time. And second to that, you would realize that the events of the council meeting last week have created a picture that the DA-led coalition is very solid, and they've made a commitment to be solid. However, if you look at the model in which they've been proposing on this coalition, after the council meeting, they've been highlighting the name of Rhino Kaiser, who's from the Democratic Alliance. And obviously, from the abstract of, looking at these things from the glance, you will realize that the mayoral candidate would have been the former mayor, Ngaba Panda. And this model then tells us that it's a coalition that small parties accompany the bigger party in terms of their own governance. But the spin-off was that, firstly, the ANC has then introduced through their own led caucus a different model altogether that says, indeed, small parties have a role to play in our landscape of politics in the country by offering them specific power position. I mean, Northern Alliance, for occupying a speaker, is such a powerful position in the council. So I think the only fundamental lesson out of this is that coalition of that nature is subject to be nurtured and be based on specific principles. And those principles must be about how do we ensure that there is clean governance as we move along. Second to that, how do we ensure that we foreground everything towards ensuring that the people-centered service delivery, it's what really put us together.
So Bernard Sebake, thank you very much indeed. Political analyst at Nelson Mandela University, Professor Sethulego Matebesi, political analyst at the University of the Free State. Gentlemen, so much more to talk about, and I know that we will over the next few days. I really appreciate the time.